My name is Lauren, and I'm 34 years old. What I'm about to tell you will probably make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. It's a story about betrayal that runs so deep, it changed the entire course of my life. And honestly, I'm still processing all of it. Picture this. You're standing in your childhood bedroom, watching your parents pack your children's belongings into garbage bags. Your 7-year-old daughter is crying in the hallway. Your 5-year-old son keeps asking why grandma is throwing away his toys. And your parents? They're doing all this to make room for your 30-year-old brother who just got out of his third stint in rehab. That was my reality 6 months ago. The moment I realized my family had been using me as their safety net while treating me like I was disposable. But here's the thing that really gets me. I had been living in my parents' house for 2 years, helping them with their mortgage, paying for groceries, taking care of their medical appointments. I thought we were a team. I was so wrong. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Before I tell you about this life-changing decision, hit like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal that might just change how you see your own relationships. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I was making breakfast for my kids before school. My mom came downstairs with that look on her face. You know the one. That fake, cheerful expression that parents use when they're about to deliver terrible news. She poured herself coffee and sat down at our kitchen table. Our table, because I had bought it 6 months earlier when their old one broke. Lauren, honey, we need to talk. Those words hit me like ice water. Nothing good ever starts with those words, especially not at 7 in the morning when you're trying to get kids ready for school. My dad shuffled in behind her, avoiding eye contact. He went straight to the newspaper like he always did when uncomfortable conversations were about to happen. But this time, he wasn't reading. He was hiding. Your brother called last night, Mom continued. He's doing really well in the program this time. The counselors think he's ready to come home and start fresh. I felt my stomach drop. Michael had been in and out of treatment centers for the past 5 years. Each time, my parents welcomed him back with open arms and empty promises. Each time, things got worse. The last time he lived with us, he stole my laptop to sell for drug money. Before that, it was my grandmother's jewelry. That's great, Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. I hope it works out for him this time. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The thing is, he's going to need his old room back. You know, for stability and routine. The counselors emphasized how important a familiar environment is for recovery. His old room. The room my children had been sleeping in for 2 years. The room where my daughter had hung her artwork on the walls. The room where my son kept his collection of superhero figures lined up on the windowsill. I set down the spatula I'd been holding. Mom, that's Emma and Tyler's room now. They've made it their space. Where exactly do you expect them to sleep? My father finally looked up from his newspaper. There's the basement. It's not so bad down there. We could set up some beds. The basement, a damp, windowless space where they stored Christmas decorations and old paint cans. They wanted to put my children in the basement so my adult brother could have the sunny bedroom with the garden view. Have you ever felt the exact moment when you realize you've been living in someone else's version of reality? That's what happened to me standing in that kitchen. I had been telling myself we were family, helping family. But the truth was, I was just the convenient daughter who paid bills and asked for nothing in return. I need some time to think about this, I managed to say. My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from somewhere far away. Mom reached over and patted my hand. Of course, sweetheart. Take all the time you need. Michael won't be out for another 3 weeks. 3 weeks to figure out how to tell my children they were being displaced for an uncle who had never once asked about their well-being. 3 weeks to come up with a plan that wouldn't destroy what was left of my family relationships. 3 weeks to somehow make sense of a situation that felt completely insane. But sometimes, the most life-changing decisions happen in moments when you finally see clearly. And what I saw that morning changed everything. Let me take you back 2 years so you understand how I ended up in this impossible situation. Because the truth is, I didn't just stumble into living with my parents by accident. I made that choice believing it would benefit everyone involved. After my divorce, I was struggling. Really struggling. Tom had left me with nothing but debt and 2 confused kids who didn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home anymore. I was working 2 part-time jobs, trying to keep up with rent on a tiny apartment, and honestly, I was drowning. My parents had always seemed so supportive during the divorce proceedings. Mom would call every day to check on us. Dad would come over on weekends to fix things around my apartment. When they suggested we move in with them temporarily, it felt like a lifeline. "It makes perfect sense," Dad had said. "The house is too big for just your mother and me. You could help us with expenses, and we could help with the kids." Their house was this beautiful colonial they'd bought when I was in high school. 4 bedrooms, a big backyard, and enough space for all of us. Michael's old room had been sitting empty since his last relapse, and it seemed natural for Emma and Tyler to settle in there. At first, it felt like a blessing. The kids loved having their grandparents around. Emma would help my mom in the garden every evening. Tyler would follow my dad around the garage, learning about tools and engines. We felt like a real family unit for the first time since the divorce. But looking back now, I can see the patterns that should have worried me. My parents had always treated Michael differently than me. He was the baby, born when I was already 12. He was also the son they'd hoped for after having 2 daughters first. Yes, I have an older sister, Rebecca, but she moved to California years ago and rarely visits. Michael could do no wrong in their eyes, even when he was doing everything wrong. When he dropped out of college, they said he was finding himself. When he couldn't hold down jobs, they blamed his sensitivity and artistic nature. When he started using drugs, they called it self-medication for depression. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one. The daughter who graduated college with honors, worked steady jobs, got married young, and tried to do everything right. But somehow, doing everything right never earned me the same unconditional support they showered on my brother. I should mention my sister Rebecca, because she plays into this story later. Rebecca had watched our parents enable Michael for years before she moved across the country. She used to call me and say, "Lauren, you can't save him. And you can't save them from him either." I thought she was being dramatic. I thought I understood the situation better because I was there, seeing the daily struggles, witnessing what I believed was genuine effort from my brother to get better. Rebecca seemed cold and detached from 3,000 miles away. The arrangement with my parents worked well for the first year. I paid them $800 a month, which covered my portion of utilities, groceries, and helped with their mortgage. I also took over most of the household management. I coordinated my dad's doctor appointments for his diabetes. I organized my mom's medications. I handled the grocery shopping and meal planning. In return, they provided childcare when I needed it and gave my kids the stable home environment I couldn't afford on my own. It seemed like the perfect mutual arrangement. But Michael's presence loomed over everything, even when he wasn't physically there. Every few months, he'd call from whatever city he'd ended up in, usually needing money. My parents would wire him hundreds of dollars without question. They'd spend days afterward worried sick, making excuses for why he hadn't called back. During his second year of my living there, Michael came home for Christmas. He was supposedly clean then, full of promises and plans for the future. My kids were excited to meet their uncle. I had built him up in their minds as this creative, adventurous person who just needed some family support. The visit was a disaster. Michael was moody and unpredictable. He slept until noon every day, criticized everything from my parenting to my cooking, and made my kids uncomfortable with his erratic behavior. On Christmas morning, I caught him going through my purse. When I confronted him, he exploded. He accused me of being jealous of the attention our parents gave him. He said I was a failure who couldn't even keep her marriage together. My kids heard every word. After he left, my parents acted like nothing had happened. They made excuses for his behavior and suggested I had been too sensitive. That should have been my wake-up call. But I stayed. Because I believed family meant forgiveness. I believed love meant sacrifice. The 3 weeks after my parents' announcement felt like living in a pressure cooker. Every morning I'd wake up hoping the previous day had been a nightmare. Every evening I'd go to bed knowing tomorrow would bring me closer to an impossible decision. My kids sensed something was wrong. Emma started having trouble sleeping. Tyler became clingy, following me around the house like he was afraid I might disappear. They had already lost their father's daily presence in their lives. The idea of losing their bedroom, their sense of security again, felt cruel beyond measure. I tried talking to my mom several more times, hoping to find some compromise. Maybe Michael could take the guest room. Maybe we could convert the den. Every suggestion was met with the same response. Michael needs stability, Lauren. The counselors were very clear about this. It was always about what Michael needed. Never about what my children needed. Never about what I had sacrificed to help keep the family afloat. During this time, I started paying closer attention to things I had previously ignored. Like how my mom would light up whenever Michael called, but barely looked up from her crossword puzzle when I came home from work. Or how my dad would spend 20 minutes on the phone discussing Michael's progress, but had never once asked me how I was coping as a single mother. I also started doing some math. Over the past 2 years, I had contributed nearly $20,000 to household expenses. I had saved them money on caregiving by managing their medical appointments and medications. I had provided free babysitting for neighbors' kids to earn extra income, which I'd always shared for household needs. Meanwhile, they had sent Michael over $15,000 in the same period, according to the bank statements I helped organize for tax season. Money they claimed they couldn't afford while I was paying their mortgage. But the real wake-up call came when I overheard a phone conversation between my parents. They were in their bedroom, but the walls in that old house were thin. My mom was talking to someone about Michael's return. "It's going to be so wonderful having our son back home," she said. "Lauren will understand. She's always been so reasonable about family obligations." Family obligations. That's what I had become. Not a daughter making sacrifices out of love, but a family obligation who could be reasonable about whatever they needed from me. I started making quiet inquiries about apartments. The rental market had changed dramatically since I'd moved in with my parents. Everything was more expensive, and my credit had taken hits during the divorce that I was still repairing. But I found a few possibilities. Small places, but places where my children would have their own space. Then Rebecca called. My sister had this uncanny timing. She always seemed to sense when family drama was escalating, even from across the country. Maybe it was years of experience navigating our parents' dysfunction. "Let me guess," she said after I explained the situation. "They want you to accommodate Michael again, and you're trying to figure out how to make it work." "It's more complicated than that, Rebecca." "No, Lauren, it's not. it's exactly what I told you would happen. They're using you as their financial safety net while prioritizing their golden child. The only complicated part is why you're still surprised. Her words stung because they rang true. But Rebecca wasn't finished. Do you know what happened the last time I visited? Michael was living there then, remember? Mom spent the entire weekend talking about his potential, his artistic gifts, his sensitive nature. When I mentioned your promotion at work, she changed the subject. When I brought up Emma's honor roll achievement, she said, "Yes, Lauren's kids are doing well," like it was just expected. I remembered that visit. I had been so focused on making everything perfect, on proving that our living arrangement was working, that I hadn't noticed the subtle dismissals. What are you saying, Rebecca? I'm saying you've been playing a game where the rules were never fair. And now they're asking you to sacrifice your children's well-being for someone who has never once considered yours. After that call, I started seeing everything differently. I noticed how my parents talked about their future plans, and those plans always included Michael but never specifically included me or my kids. We were just assumed to be there, accommodating whatever Michael needed. I started documenting things, not because I was planning some dramatic confrontation, but because I needed to make sure I wasn't going crazy. The favoritism, the double standards, the casual dismissal of my contributions. All of it was real. And then Michael called the house himself. Michael's call came on a Thursday evening while I was helping Tyler with his homework. My mom answered with her usual excitement whenever her youngest son called. But this conversation was different. I could hear her tone shifting, becoming defensive. "Michael, honey, slow down. What do you mean the room isn't ready?" I looked up from Tyler's math worksheet. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see my mom pacing in the living room, phone pressed to her ear. "Well, yes, Lauren and the kids are still using it, but we talked about this. You're not coming home for another 2 weeks." My stomach clenched. Something had changed. "Tomorrow? But Michael, we haven't had time to—" Mom's voice trailed off as she noticed me watching. She turned away, lowering her voice. But I had heard enough. I closed Tyler's workbook and sent both kids upstairs to play. Then I waited. When Mom hung up, she came into the kitchen looking frazzled. Dad appeared from his workshop, apparently having been summoned by some silent signal between them. "Michael's getting released early," Mom announced. "Tomorrow afternoon. The program director thinks he's ready, and there was an opening in the transitional housing program he wanted to enter, but only if he has a stable home base first." Dad cleared his throat. "We need Emma and Tyler's things. Moved out tonight." Tonight. They wanted me to wake up my children and tell them they were losing their room with 12 hours' notice, for a man who had never once asked about their welfare. "Absolutely not," I said. Both my parents stared at me like I had just spoken in a foreign language. In their world, Lauren didn't say no. Lauren was reasonable. Lauren understood family obligations. "Honey, I know it's sudden, but Michael really needs our support right now," Mom started. "And my children don't?" "That's different, Lauren. Your kids have you. Michael only has us." That sentence hung in the air like a toxic cloud. My children had me, so they mattered less. Michael had them, so his needs came first. The logic was so twisted it was almost breathtaking. "Mom, Emma and Tyler have been living in that room for 2 years. They've built their entire sense of security around this house being their home. You want me to destroy that for someone who has stolen from this family, lied to this family, and has never once prioritized anyone's well-being but his own?" Dad stepped forward with his hands raised like he was calming a wild animal. "Lauren, you're being dramatic. The basement isn't that bad. We can make it cozy." "The basement is not suitable for children, Dad. It's damp, it's dark, and it smells like mildew. Would you have put me in the basement when I was 7? The question caught him off guard. I could see him trying to formulate an answer that wouldn't sound completely hypocritical. That was different. You were. I was what? Your biological child? Because Emma and Tyler are your grandchildren. They're family, too. Mom jumped in. Of course they're family. We love those children. But Michael is going through a crisis. He needs stability. Michael is 30 years old. My kids are 7 and 5. If anyone needs stability, it's them. The conversation was escalating. Voices rising. I could hear small footsteps upstairs, probably my children listening to adults argue about their fate. That thought made something snap inside me. You know what? I said, my voice suddenly calm. You're right. Michael needs stability, and my children need security, and I need to stop enabling this dysfunction. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through the apartment listings I had bookmarked. What are you doing? Mom asked. I'm calling about an apartment. We'll be out by Sunday. Lauren, don't be ridiculous. You can't afford your own place. I've been paying $800 a month here, plus groceries and utilities. That's more than enough for a small apartment. It might be tight, but my kids will have their own space. Dad looked panicked. Who's going to help with the mortgage, the medical appointments, the household management? And there it was. The real reason they were upset. Not because they'd miss us, but because they'd lose their live-in financial contributor and caretaker. Figure it out, I said. The same way I'm going to figure out how to rebuild our lives without family support. I walked upstairs to start packing. Behind me, I could hear my parents arguing with each other, but I no longer cared what they said. For the first time in 2 years, I was choosing my children's well-being over my parents' expectations. The next 72 hours were chaos, but they were productive chaos, and that made all the difference. I called in sick to work Friday and spent the day apartment hunting. By evening, I had secured a small 2-bedroom place across town. It wasn't perfect. The carpet was worn and the kitchen was tiny, but it had something our current situation lacked: respect for my children's needs. Emma and Tyler were confused but surprisingly adaptable. When I explained we were getting our own place, Emma asked if she could decorate her half of the shared bedroom however she wanted. Tyler wanted to know if he could hang his superhero posters on the walls. After months of uncertainty, they were excited about having control over their environment again. My parents barely spoke to me during the packing process. Michael arrived Saturday morning, 3 hours before our scheduled move-out time. He looked healthier than his last visit, but he walked straight to his room without acknowledging my children, who were still folding their clothes into boxes in the hallway. Thanks for keeping it warm for me, he said, like it was a joke. I didn't respond. But Emma, my 7-year-old daughter, looked up at him with the kind of clarity that only children possess and said, "You're welcome, but it was our room, not yours." Michael laughed uncomfortably and retreated downstairs. My parents rushed to fuss over him, and I realized how invisible my children and I had become in their narrative. The apartment felt enormous that first night, even though it was half the size of my parents' house. We ordered pizza and ate it on the floor because our furniture wouldn't be delivered until Monday. Emma and Tyler thought it was the best adventure ever. "Mom," Tyler said, crawling into my lap, "is this really ours?" "Yes, baby. This is really ours." That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in our empty living room and cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based on what my family needed, not what other people expected from us. The following months were challenging in ways I hadn't anticipated, Money was tight, tighter than it had been at my parents' house. I had to take on extra freelance work in the evenings. We ate a lot of pasta and rice dishes. But we also had something we'd been missing: peace. No more walking on eggshells around unpredictable family drama. No more children overhearing arguments about whether they mattered as much as their uncle. No more feeling like a guest in what was supposed to be our home. My parents tried to maintain contact at first. Mom would call weekly, updating me on Michael's progress, and casually mentioning how difficult it was managing household expenses without my contributions. The conversations felt like manipulation disguised as family connection. Rebecca called more frequently during this transition. She had been through her own process of establishing boundaries with our parents years earlier. "How are you handling the guilt?" she asked during one late-night conversation. "Some days are harder than others," I admitted. "But then Emma will show me a drawing she made of our apartment, or Tyler will tell me he feels safer here, and I remember why I made this choice." 6 months later, everything changed again. I received a call from my mom on a Tuesday morning. She sounded exhausted and defeated in a way I'd never heard before. "Michael's gone," she said without preamble. "What do you mean gone?" "He left 3 days ago, took some things from the house and just left. We don't know where he is." I felt a familiar pang of worry for my brother, despite everything. But it was followed immediately by clarity about what this call really meant. "I'm sorry, Mom. That must be really difficult." "Lauren, we were wondering, would you consider moving back? The house feels so empty now, and we could really use help with expenses." There it was, the invitation back into dysfunction, presented as mutual need. "No, Mom, we're building our life here." But the children miss their grandparents, and we miss them. It was partially true. My parents did miss Emma and Tyler, but they missed us on their terms, as supporting characters in their drama, not as people with our own needs and boundaries. "You're welcome to visit any time," I said, "but this is our home now." After I hung up, I looked around our small apartment. Emma was reading in her corner of the shared bedroom. Tyler was building something elaborate with blocks on the living room floor. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were thriving. 1 year later, I can honestly say that leaving my parents' house was the best decision I've made as a mother. But the journey to this realization hasn't been linear or simple. Let me paint you a picture of where we are now. Emma just turned 8 and is reading at a 5th grade level. Tyler is 6 and has developed this incredible confidence I never saw. When we were living with constant family tension, they both sleep through the night now. They don't ask me anymore if we're going to have to move again. We're still in the same small apartment, but it feels like a palace because it's ours. Emma has covered her half of their bedroom with artwork and photos of friends from school. Tyler's side looks like a superhero command center. They've learned to share space respectfully, and honestly, they seem closer now than they ever were before. I've been promoted at work twice in the past year. Turns out, when you're not managing other people's crises every evening, you have mental energy to focus on your own professional growth. Who knew? But here's what I want to talk about, because I think it's the most important part of this story. The relationship with my parents didn't end when I moved out. It changed. And that change has been more valuable than I ever expected. 3 months ago, my mom started coming to visit us every other Saturday. Just her, not my dad initially. She brings groceries sometimes, or little gifts for the kids, but mostly, she just sits in our living room and watches Emma and Tyler be themselves. During one of these visits, she said something that caught me completely off guard. "I never realized how stressed they were before. Emma seems so much more relaxed now." It was the first time she had acknowledged that our previous living situation might not have been ideal for my children. It wasn't a full apology, but it was recognition. My dad has been slower to adjust. He's still focused on the financial aspects of our separation. He'll make comments about how we could afford more if we moved back, or how expensive rent is compared to helping with their mortgage. But he's starting to see that my kids are happier, and that matters to him too. Michael? He's been in contact, sporadically. He called me once to ask for money, which I declined. He sent a birthday card to Emma 6 weeks late. He's still the same person, but he's no longer my responsibility or my problem to solve. Rebecca visited last month. Her first trip home in 3 years. She spent time at my apartment instead of staying with our parents. Watching her interact with Emma and Tyler was beautiful. She told me later that she was proud of the choice I made. It takes courage to choose your children's well-being over family expectations, she said. Not everyone can do that. I want to address something directly to anyone watching this who might be in a similar situation. Breaking away from family dysfunction feels impossible when you're in the middle of it. You worry about being selfish. You worry about burning bridges. You worry about whether you can actually survive on your own. But here's what I learned. Choosing your children's emotional health is never selfish. Creating boundaries with people who don't respect your family's needs isn't cruel. And surviving on your own is often easier than you think once you stop subsidizing other people's poor choices. I also want to say this. Family relationships can heal and change, but only when everyone involved is willing to acknowledge reality. My mom Saturday visits work because she comes to our space, respects our routines, and focuses on being a grandmother rather than trying to manage my life choices. If you're dealing with similar family dynamics, I encourage you to start small. You don't have to make dramatic exits or issue ultimatums, but you can start prioritizing your own family's needs. You can start saying no to requests that compromise your children's well-being. You can start recognizing the difference between family loyalty and family dysfunction. To everyone who has watched this entire story, thank you for taking this journey with me. Family relationships are complicated, and there's no perfect roadmap for navigating them. But there is wisdom in recognizing when change is necessary. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your children's needs? Have you experienced favoritism in your family that affected how you parent your own kids? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more real talk about family dynamics, single parenting, and building the life your children deserve. Sometimes the most important family you can create is the one where everyone's needs actually matter. Your children are watching how you handle difficult relationships. Show them that their well-being matters. Show them that boundaries are healthy. Show them that love sometimes means making hard choices.